Hello, and welcome back to the My First Marathon podcast, where we interview runners in all stages of their running careers about their first marathon experiences to prove to you that anyone can run a marathon. My name is Taylor, and on today's episode, we talk to someone who running hasn't left alone since 2020. After having the itch to give it a go in 2020 and having the race canceled, to trying to sign up again a couple years later and getting COVID, the odds were stacked against her to run her first marathon. But running kept coming up, and in 2023, she got the opportunity to run her first marathon in New York City. We get into topics of fueling challenges and the mental battle of training for your first marathon, as well as experiencing racing as a slower runner. Without further ado, let's jump right in. Please welcome Amanda. Amanda, thank you so much for coming on the show this weekend. How's your Saturday off to so far?
Pretty good. Slept in today. Don't usually do that with long runs usually scheduled on the weekend, so
Yeah,
I indulged in sleeping in this weekend.
I did the same thing. It must be. I feel like it's the weather. The weather is something about it is making me just not want to get out of bed in the morning.
It's way too cold to get up and just be active. You need to
Right.
defrost.
Yeah, ease into it.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, cool. Well, thanks for coming on the show this
Yeah.
weekend. I'm really excited to break down your journey. Like we were talking before we first started, we've followed each other on social media for a while, so I know a little bit about it, but excited to get into the details. If
Yeah,
you
thanks
could,
for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Let's just start from the beginning. How'd you get introduced to movement/running in the first place?
Yeah, so I'd say my journey started back in 2020, the beginning of 2020, before COVID. I woke up on New Year's Day and was just I think I want to run a marathon. And at the time, it's the people around me were like, that's absolutely ridiculous. You don't run. What,
Yeah.
what are you planning on doing? So it was just kind of a crazy goal that I was I feel like I want to do something. I need something in my life that's just different. So I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I signed up for the New York City Marathon with a charity. So beginning of 2020, when you were first able to do that. And then I just kind of ran my first 5K in February, ran another one in March. I was a slow runner. I figured out, I was like, okay, I'm not running 8-minute miles. We're doing this
Sure.
at an 11-minute pace at the time. And then I just, throughout this summer of training, if you want to call it training, because I really, looking back, I'm what was I even doing? I don't remember having
Yeah.
a plan. And I remember panicking at one point in July. I was like, I'm not ready for this. What am I doing? And then they canceled the marathon because obviously
Right.
COVID. So they canceled the marathon. And then with my charity, I had the choice to either just they keep the money that I raised and then that's it. I just don't run. I don't put myself into another marathon. Or I had the option to go into the 2021, 22, or 23 marathon. And I was like, I don't know what my life is going to be like. I'm just keep the fundraising money that I got. This goal is, let's move on. Let's find something new in life.
Sure. Yeah.
So then now fast forward to 2021, I'm having the itch again. I'm I gotta do something. So I sign up for a half marathon in March of 2021. Or it's in March or April of 2021, whatever it is. And then 2 weeks before the race, I get COVID.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm okay, this is really done this time. This is not meant for me.
All the signs.
I'm not meant to be a runner. So then I kind of really gave it up. Then fast forward to the beginning of 2022, one of my friends, she got into running and she's like, do you want to run a 10K? And I was like, fine, I'll run the 10K. So we signed up for the 10K in, I think it was May of 2022. So that was the longest race I ever did. And it was the New York Roadrunners Queens 10K. So we go, we run it. And that was the first time I ever experienced runner's high. And we were like, this is amazing. We got to keep doing it. Should we just do the marathon? We should just do the marathon. So, so we ended up that same night or the day after, we signed up for the 9+1 program that the New York Roadrunners does. So you sign up for 9 qualifying races. So it's 10Ks, 5Ks, half marathons, whatever it is throughout the year, volunteer at one race, and then you get guaranteed entry into the following year's marathon. So throughout 2022, we ran the 9 races, we volunteered at one, and then we had guaranteed entry into 2023 New York City Marathon. So that's what really got me into it. Just kind of at first thinking this is not for me. And then in 2022, 2 years later, I was like, we're doing a marathon. Like, it's guaranteed, it's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, so running's just been kind of trying to like bulldoze its way into your life.
Yes,
Since
yes.
2020,
I
it
have
sounds
no
like.
choice. I'm a runner, and I have no
Yeah.
choice.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I know COVID for a lot of people was really disheartening because a lot of people had trained for their marathons and just had it like go up, completely blow up in their face. How far along in the process were you when you found out that New York City was canceled that year?
I want to say that like the furthest I ran was like 7 miles. So
Okay.
if for a normal marathon runner, I should have been way further along, but because I didn't know what I was doing, I was like just running whatever it was on the weekend. So I only got up to 7 miles. Honestly, I don't even think it was that far. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. So you were still pretty early on. And
yeah,
I guess it takes a minute to really get that bug, especially when they're in 2020, like there weren't any races and you didn't have that experience where you got to like go experience the crowd. So was the first time that you really felt that first 10K that you just mentioned?
Yeah, I would say the 10K because that was my first New York Roadrunner race ever, and seeing like the amount of people that show up to those races and even like the crowds, like everyone, I was not expecting that. Like I remember when I first went and I see like the line of porta potties, and I was like, that's a lot of porta potties. Like how many people are running this? And it's like I like didn't know anything. I had no idea like the process, like, oh, you have to wait in line to use the porta pot. Like I was like, there's no regular bathrooms. Like the whole like culture of like races, like I had no idea about it. And then just like going to the race, going to that 10K and like feeling the crowd, the energy and everything was like the first time I experienced like the hype around it.
Yeah. And then you get that itch and you can't get rid of it.
Yes,
It's so funny how it works.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So, and that's a pretty big race to start with. So when you said you hit that running high moment, I know it's really hard to put into words. I still haven't really figured out how to describe like what a running high feels like.
Yeah.
But if you could, like what did that experience feel like for you?
I would say like it was towards the end of the race, because even with the 10K, you feel the feelings of like, okay, I'm starting off good. Oh my God, this sucks. And then you're like, okay, wait, no, I feel good again. So kind of like, it's like a mini, like what you go through in a marathon. And I remember towards the end, it's like, you almost feel like a buzz. Like it's like, you feel like your veins are like buzzing. It's just like you said, it's hard to explain. It's almost like you feel like nothing around you is like real. And it's like, and I always said since then, making decisions on a runner's high is the same thing as making decisions when you're drunk.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Like sober you will be like, what was I thinking?
Right. Yeah. Hopefully it sounds like the running high was still like in your system when you were thinking about 9+1.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
So I got myself into
so
running
true.
a marathon when I was on a runner's high.
It's so true. I think that's the reason why people, you hit like mile 20 and you're hitting the wall and you're like, I'm never going to do this again. And as soon as you cross the finish line, it's like, all right,
what's next one?
Like, exactly. Yeah. It's so funny.
Yeah.
So cool. So you had that experience. That was kind of, sounds like your turning point for you when you were like, all right, we're locking in here. And then 9+1 is really interesting. I've gotten a couple questions about what that process is, like how you sign up, how competitive it is. Do you mind just kind of talking about what your experience was with the 9+1 program?
Yeah, sure. So back in 2022, it wasn't as in high demand. So like I said, the 10K was in like May. And then so you're almost halfway through the year, and I was still able to sign up for 8 additional races at that point. But basically the qualifications for that is you have to be a New York Roadrunner member. You sign up for the 9 qualifying races, which not all of them are qualifying. Most of them are, but you'll be able to see like on the website, it says like 9+1, and then choose a race to volunteer at. So in 2022, that was like super smooth for me. And then I actually did that same process this year, 2024, so that I run the 2025 New York City Marathon. So this past year, it was a little bit more like vigorous, where it's like I became a member plus member, which means I get like priority to sign up for the races before everybody else. And then I was signed up for races, like ran them all before April. And because it's in such high demand now, it's like you need to like be on it. Like you need to have your email notifications on from the New York Roadrunners where they say, okay, registration's open, and you need to go in and like sign up ASAP. Like that's the one thing that's changed in the past 2 years is like the demand for people wanting to run. So if you want to do the 9+1 program, it's the easiest way I'd say to get into the New York City Marathon, but you just got to be like, in January, look for those races, sign up for as many as you can, get those 9 done as soon as possible, so that you have guaranteed entry.
Cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's definitely gotten a lot more competitive in
Yeah.
the last couple of years. I think all the major races have gotten really competitive. So it sounds like you just need to be on top of it.
Yeah.
Cool. So for you, so you're going through this whole process. You're running all these 9 races. How did you decide if you were going to do like 5Ks, 10Ks, and how did you fit that into your plan for New York?
So those 9 races, after the 10K, the next longest race I was going to do was the Staten Island Half Marathon in October. So I had like those 4 months to kind of like train for that. So as I'm going through like now a half marathon training, which is new to me, I'm going into the city and running like a 5K in Central Park one Saturday or Sunday. So it was fairly easy for me to fit those other races into my schedule, especially because I don't live that far from the city. It's just a train right away. So that kind of worked out well, and it held me accountable for staying on track for the half marathon training.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it's always good to throw in a couple races along whatever race you're training for, just to like practice the race day routine. Like you just never know. So that makes sense. And training for your first half marathon. So when you were back training for your marathon in 2020, you said that you weren't really following a plan or anything like that. For your first half marathon, did you find like resources for a plan, or what was the strategy there?
So I think for my half marathon, I did the old Google search. How to train for a half marathon. And I think I just found like some random plan on Runner's World. They usually have plans that are, they're not individualized. It was just kind of like very general. So I just kind of followed that throughout the half marathon training. And I mean, it worked for me, but.
Yeah, I did the same thing for my first half. Just like, I think it was like a Pinterest plan or something like that. Just had mileage and you were just hitting it.
And no speed work, like nothing. It was just like, go run 3 miles today. It's like, okay.
Right. Yeah, sure, I'll do that. But I remember from those plans, like you said, they're very generic and it's just mileage. So it's hard to really understand like the different types of running and what your body needs and things like that. And I know for me, following those plans, like it was kind of a shock how my body was feeling. So how were you feeling as you were building mileage through a plan like that?
Well, for me, because like I was slower back then. Like I was like probably had 2 minutes more on my average mile time. So I didn't really have like my base pace was my only pace.
Sure.
So and I think because I never did speed training or anything, it was kind of like I would just go out and run. It's like, oh, it took me 14 minutes per mile. Like, that's fine. Like, I wasn't putting pressure on myself to be fast or anything. So yeah, there were times where like, oh man, my body hurts today. Okay, I'm just going to walk it. So like, I was sticking to the training, but I was also very lenient where it was like, oh, my knee kind of hurts. I'm just going to walk these last 3 miles. So yeah, you feel things with your body, like just being in pain, just doing that out of nowhere, training for a half marathon out of nowhere, essentially. But it's kind of up to you. It's like, what is your goal? Like, what do you want to get out of it? Do you just want to finish? Do you want to reach a PR? And for me at the time, it was just kind of like, I'm just doing this. Like, I'll show up and see how it goes. So there wasn't that much pressure on kind of performance for me.
Yeah, no, I love that. And now that you're on the other side of it, we'll get fast forward to what you've been doing nowadays. Yeah. But like looking back on that, how important do you think that was, like having that mindset?
Honestly, I wouldn't have done it any other way. Like I think that was being so easy on myself, just going through the entire process I just felt no pressure. Like it was just, I'm doing this for fun. Like this is it. Like, it's just fun for me. I'm getting out there and doing something I never thought I would do. And I think that's the best way to start out rather than setting some ridiculous goal. Like, oh, I'm going to run my half marathon in an hour and a half. It's like, okay, let's step back and let's just like get a half marathon done. Like, let's just do it. So having that mindset is definitely like, I wouldn't change it. That's something I wouldn't change from the beginning.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, that's where beginner runners, when you're first starting out, if you put those aggressive time goals on yourself with no running experience, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure unless you have a baseline activity where you can just like get up and go do something like that.
Exactly.
So you were talking about like not liking running, and I know COVID had something to do with like halting your running journey, but in the beginning, like not loving it. And I think sometimes people fall out of love with it because they push themselves so much.
Well,
so I think it's important.
There's so many people that I talk to that they're like, oh, I hate running. I hate it. And I'm like, how fast are you running? And they're like, oh, I'm trying to do like my 8-minute mile that I used to do in high school. And I'm like, maybe you need to slow down. I think we need to slow down. Everyone just do a mile at your like easy effort. And I guarantee you will enjoy running. Because it's like, if you're out there trying to sprint an 8-minute mile when you've never done it before, of course you're going to hate it. Your body's going to hate it.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Yeah. No, it makes total sense. Cool. So we were building mileage slowly. We were working towards this half marathon. Yep. And how was your first half marathon experience? That's your first like big double-digit race that you ran.
Yes. So in the moment, like running, I think I got to mile like 7, and that's where I hit the wall for a half marathon. So I ran like that entire time up to mile 7, and then I was like, oh my God, like this is hard. Like what? Like I don't even know. Like, I'm like, what do I do? Like, and also with practicing with fueling, I really didn't know much about it back then. So I was just kind of like eating these gels that like were disgusting. And so, so throughout that experience, like the actual race, you feel a lot of different things. Like, I love this, but I hate this at the same time. And you reach a point where you're like, what am I doing? Like, I have to run this twice now. I have guaranteed entry into the New York City Marathon, and I have to run 2 of these. Like, that's
right. Yeah.
and then you get to the finish line and you're like, wait, no, that wasn't that bad. That was easy. It's like, we always psych. It's always been the same with every single race. You psych yourself out thinking like, you gaslight yourself basically. Like, oh, what I just went through, like, that wasn't even that bad. Like, let's do it again.
Totally. Yeah, and you kind of have to have those, or at least I feel like you have to have those like hard moments in a race or hard moments in a training run to really appreciate how you feel at the end of the race. Because you're like,
yes, exactly.
If you felt like that at the end, then nobody would ever want to do it. But you cross that finish line, you're like, oh, okay, this is why people do this.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the reason why we keep doing it. It's because you kind of have to overcome the struggle, and then you feel the joy at the end, and you're like, oh my God, that was totally worth it.
Totally. Yeah. Cool. So first half marathon went pretty well, a little bit of up and down, but that's expected for your first half marathon. And then where did you go from there? So is that like the halfway point of your training, or where were we at in terms of training for the
So that was October of 2022. So that was 13 months out from the New York City Marathon the following year.
Okay. So we had lots of time.
Yeah, so I had a lot of time. So winter running, that wasn't my thing that year. I said, I'm not doing running this winter. I mean, like, I would go out on runs like here and there, but I wasn't like training specifically. I probably wasn't running as much as I should have for somebody that had their first marathon a year later. So I really started my training for the New York City Marathon in 2023 in June, I want to say it was June. Which that's probably one thing I would change to, is I would have continued throughout the beginning of the year to continue running just to like keep a pace. So then it was almost like I was starting from scratch again, where it was like I lost my the progress that I've made, and then let's like start from scratch in June. And then I started off with very low mileage. Like at first, I think I followed one of those plans, the random Pinterest plans at first.
Yeah.
And then I eventually signed up for, because the New York Roadrunners has a plan that you could sign up for and pay for the year. I forget what it's called, but I ended up paying for one. And yeah, so I just kind of like went through the summer of training, which was absolutely miserable. If you've ran a fall marathon, you know how miserable summer training is. So there were a lot of times where I did slack a little. I was kind of like, 8 is good for today, when like I was supposed to run 12. So I definitely was still very lenient with my training, but I was okay with that again. I was like, no, like my goal is to finish. That's it. My goal is to finish. I went into my 2 goals were to finish and to not poop my pants. Those are my 2 goals.
Yeah.
I was like, so I kind of always just like had that in my mind throughout training. Which looking back now, I'm like, wow, I really had no idea what I was doing. Like I was really setting myself up for failure.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people can relate to that. I can relate to that for sure.
Yeah, I think it's like that's what makes the progress like after your first marathon so much better, is because you look back at your old self and you're like, what was I thinking? Like I would never do what I did back then now. Like, but it's just part of the process. It's like you have to go through it. You have to go through it to figure out what works for you.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you learn so much about yourself the first marathon,
Yeah.
where you have those like those days where you're playing like a mental battle with yourself about how many
Hmm.
miles you want to run, or you're in the middle of a run and it sucks. So like
Yeah.
what were some of those experiences like for you where you were fighting that like internal battle with yourself about the marathon?
It's just like being in the heat. And I remember one run specifically. I was like, because I wouldn't go to trails and run. I would just run from like where I live and just around the area. And I remember I'm
Sure.
like on the side of this busy road. It's like 90 degrees. I'm dripping sweat, and I'm like running out of water that I have like in my water bottles on my belt. And I'm just like what? Like no way. Like my body can't do this. And it's like you just question everything. You're like, why am I doing this? Like what? Like this is insane. Like who voluntarily starts training in the summer for their first marathon? Like this the experience right now on the side of the road, like a busy road, isn't fun. Like and you're just like playing everything in your head. Like no, maybe I'll just won't do it. But then it's like you have to have those negative thoughts to then like be like, no, it's something so much more than this. It's deeper than that. It's everyone says you always have to think about your why. And my why
Yeah.
has always kind of been just because I can, and just because I know that I could do hard things. So I just constantly would tell myself that when I would have those negative thoughts, it always led back to, like I can do this. Like there's people that literally can't do this, and I am physically capable of doing this. And if I give up, that's just, what does that say about me? Like, I'm not somebody that gives up. You still have to just keep going. So a lot of times I would have the same conversation like that, even during the marathon. You have that battle with yourself mentally, and you just have to figure out your why and really dig deep and keep going.
Totally. Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah. The emphasis on the why, and your why is always going to be important. Now that we're both on the other side of our first marathons,
Yes.
we can say
Yeah.
that your why is always going to be important, but
Always.
especially for that first marathon, because
Yeah.
you're going to be questioning everything. You have nothing to
Mm-hmm.
lose for your first marathon. You've never ran one before. You're probably not considering yourself a runner at the time.
Yes. Yeah.
So you have nothing to lose. So it's so easy to just say, I'm done. So
Yeah.
you have to like have that why to turn to. I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So we're training. We're going through this thing. What was it like the first time that you hit like a mileage over 13? Like the first time you got over that half marathon hump? Do you remember what that felt like?
That was, well, now I'm specifically thinking about my 18 miler. That was the furthest I ran. That was like my longest run, like about a month before the actual race. And I was in Florida at the time on vacation. And my family that I was with, they were like, "You're going to go run 18 miles." And it wasn't warm. It wasn't warm at the time. It was in October. So it was cooler. But that run stands out to me specifically because of how long it took me, and like the different stages. I broke it up by, I tried to break it up by like 5, and just like, okay, I'm going to run 5 this way and then come back to the original starting point, fill up my water, and then run 5. And like, that was kind of my process for it. But just the fact that it took me so long, and I was walking, I was running, there were times where I was giving up, but I didn't stop. And it's like getting past that, like the furthest point that you ever run, and running the 18 miles, or sometimes it happens with 15 miles, 17 miles, whatever your longest run is. Up until that point, you constantly have to think about the end. So it's like, I've never run 18 miles in my life. Like I've never gone that distance ever. So I kept thinking about the accomplishment that I'll feel at the end. So that's also something that gets me through those like longer runs. It's like, I've like 18 miles. Imagine like I could go and tell everybody today I ran 18 miles. Everybody I run into, like, what'd you do today? I ran 18 miles. And it's like, like sometimes the thought of being able to like brag about it is like, it gets you through it. Like, cause it's like, totally. It's like, what did you do today? Like, not what I did.
Oh, just casual. Yeah.
Yeah,
I love it. And I think that's where social media is huge too. I know that you're also big on social media. Is that do you feel like that's a great accountability tool for that piece too?
So that's what started. I started posting on TikTok. It was 100 days before my first marathon. And I started posting my like little videos. And it was really just to hold myself accountable. It was kind of just like, oh, I have to post my video today, so I have to run. So that was definitely a good way to like hold myself accountable. And then I ended up building like a small little community of like slower runners. And I was like, oh wow, like people actually, they love that I'm a slower runner doing this. So like I hope that I could give to people, like people can see that they can do this too. Like I'm just a very average person. Like I am like even below average when it comes to running. Like anybody can do this.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. No, agree. Cool. So we got to the 18-mile point. That was
Yes.
where you hit your peak, and kind of where you proved to yourself, like, all right, we're getting somewhere here.
Yeah.
And then did you go and do like a taper period from there? Was that part of the plan?
So the plan was to do another 18-miler.
Okay.
But I didn't. I just didn't. So another part of training that I kind of slacked on, and I was like, and people kept on telling me, no, if you did 18 miles once, you could do the 26.2. Like it's a month away. Like you'll be fine. So I'm like, all right. So like I'll listen.
Sure.
I'll listen to you. Yeah. So that month leading up to the marathon was very just like tapering. I think maybe the longest I ran was like 10 miles at one point.
Okay, cool. And then you said that you were just like a train ride away from where NYC was going to be. But the New York City Marathon, it's got all sorts of logistics. So,
Yes.
like leading up to race day, what were some of the things that you were doing to prepare yourself, to plan, to like get ready for the whole thing?
Well, I stayed in a hotel in Midtown in Manhattan for the marathon.
Cool.
The day before and the day after. So I just honestly, I was more nervous about the logistics of getting to the start line, because with New York, a lot of people are anxious about how you get to the start line in Staten Island. So if you're staying in a hotel in Midtown, you have to take the subway to the Staten Island ferry, take the ferry to Staten Island, wait online in a bus, and get bused to Start Village. Like that whole thing was like, I was like, oh my God, like should I? And then you also have the option. You have to pick this like a few months in advance. You also have the option to take the bus at 5 a.m. from some point in Midtown, and they just bus you to Start Village. So, but the problem with that is I didn't start the running my marathon until 11:30 a.m. So I'm like, if I take a bus at 5 a.m., I'm gonna be in Staten Island for like hours. That's right. So I'm like, no, I'm just gonna take the ferry and figure it out. So the thought of starting at 11:30 a.m., getting to Staten Island was really what caused the most like, okay, how do I prepare for this and make this the smoothest? Because
I'm sure. Yeah.
That itself, I'm like, this is the hardest part of the thing, like getting to the start line. Which I know it deters a lot of people from wanting to run New York, because they think about the logistics, and it's really unreal. I mean, it's the only way, because you're running through every single borough. So it's the only way that makes sense. But it's just like starting a run at 11:30 when you've practiced every other long run at 7, 5, 8 a.m., whatever time it is like an adjustment. And that's one thing also I would have changed with my training. I would have trained my long runs at like 11:30. But back to the original question, what I had to do to prepare. So because I was staying over in a hotel, I think I've repacked my bag like 5 times. I'm like, do I have my shoes? Okay, yes. Like the most important thing is my sneakers, like my gels, like, and I was wearing, I was holding a handheld water bottle, I had a pocket in it. So I made sure that was all stuffed with everything. I had like my Lululemon belt bag stuffed with everything. And just making sure I had everything. Like I was so prepared. I had Advil, I had Purell, I had wipes, I had tissues, I had toilet paper. Like I was packed, like plus all my fuel and everything. So just repacking everything, making sure I had everything was just kind of the stress of getting ready and making sure like everything would run as smoothly as possible.
Yeah. No, it's stressful. I have it even to this day, every single race, 10K, 5K, it's on a checklist. Like I'm stressing about it.
Yes,
for sure.
I know. Like days leading up, I remember like working, because I work like a regular like 9 to 5 job. Like at work, and instead of working, I'm sitting there like typing up my to-do list, like, okay, my checklist. And I'm like, I can't work. I literally, I cannot work. I can only think about the marathon.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of stress, the logistics, like the planning. It's a ton. It's a ton of stuff to think about. And you said that you were starting to like around your half marathon point, you started to think about fuel. So did you have a fuel strategy, so to speak? I know loose strategy for first marathons usually, but like, what was your plan with fuel for this race?
I think it was. So I was doing gels, and at the time I was doing like the Honey Stinger chews. because I didn't really like gels, honestly. Gels were like, not a lot of people like gels. Like, let's be
No.
real.
Yeah.
But you need it. So I had like some gels that I could kind of stomach, and then like the chews that were kind of that were better for me. But my strategy was every 30 minutes, you take a gel or have some chews. Which once we get to marathon day, I will explain what actually happened, because nothing ever goes as planned.
Nope.
But yeah, that was kind of the strategy going in.
Okay, cool. And then I forget if you said, I think you said you signed up for this race with somebody. Were you running this solo, or did you have somebody that you were running this with?
So it ended up being 3 of us that signed up, 3 friends. One friend in the beginning of the year, she ended up having a baby. So she ended up not being able to run. And she was it's like a nice excuse.
Yeah.
And she was the one that actually asked me to run the 10K, like that got me back into running, and she ended up not being able to run because she had a baby in the beginning of the year. And then one of our other friends, she ran with us. She got into like the running experience with us too. We didn't run together because she was in a different corral, which is upsetting, but she ran it too, and it was just fun having her like at the start line and with the whole experience, so I wasn't completely alone that time.
Cool. Well, and I know New York, you're not. There's no chance that you can feel alone just with all the crowd support and everybody around you. So
no.
Well, cool. Well, let's fast forward a little bit to, we've gotten logistics. We're at the start line. How were we feeling? How were the nerves? Like how was everything going?
It was definitely a lot of nerves. Like by the time I got to Start Village, I think it was like 9 a.m. after I went through the whole process of getting there. It was like 9 a.m. So I had 2.5 hours before I actually started. So me and my one friend that were there, we stayed together up until she started. So I was fine when it was like just us two. We're both like, oh, we're so nervous. Like, oh my God, I can't believe we're doing this. And then once she started, I had like an hour until I started. And that's when I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. Like, and just kind of playing everything that could go wrong in my head, and then just like psyching myself out, like, no, it's going to be fine. It's going to be okay. And the one thing about New York, the New York Start Village, is that the amount of porta potties are amazing. Like I was like, okay, one less thing to worry about. I could just get on a porta potty line. If this line is too long, I could go to this line and it's going to be okay. So that's the one less stress. Yeah. So if for anybody that's running New York, the porta potty situation at Start Village is like ideal. But yeah, just leading up it, and because it's such a long wait to start, it's like it's impossible not to feel nervous. And then I had like my little snack bag, and I'm like, am I eating too much? Am I not eating enough? Should I be fueling a little more? So it was just a lot of stress, but you're there. It's too late to turn around now. Like
right. You're locked in at that point.
No choice but to run from Staten Island to Central Park. Like
for sure. Yep. So time to roll. And then, so you stood there for about an hour. You were kind of like going through the nerves and everything. And then you get started. I'll let you choose like how you want to break down the race, but maybe let's break down like the first half or so.
Okay. So so we start the race. And like being on the Verrazano Bridge is like, I mean, I know at any point, at any start of any marathon, it's like very emotional, but it's just like to see the amount of people, like there's two, what's it called? Levels of the bridge. So I was running on the lower level, and then there's just as many people running on the upper level. So it's like just seeing the amount of people is like, you get like choked up, and you're just like, oh my God, like this is crazy. This is something so much bigger than myself. Like this isn't even about me. This is about just like everyone. And just, it's so emotional, and just running over the bridge with like the beautiful view. It's like an unreal experience. So you start mile 1 on the bridge, which is hard, by the way. Bridges are hard. Nobody told me how hard New York is until I got there and ran it. So let's just fast forward to mile 3. I start feeling like a pain in my stomach. And I'm like, that's interesting. Never felt that before on a run. So I'm like, it's just the nerves. Let's just like, don't pay attention to that. So I just keep going, get to mile 5. And I was like, I have to stop. I have to use a porta potty. Like I have no choice. I have to go. So I get in the porta potty line and I'm like, I feel myself like starting to panic. And I'm like, what the hell is happening? Like, what is going on? So I get into the porta potty, and if you ran a marathon, you know what those porta potties look like throughout the course.
Yeah.
So I get in there and I was like, no, like, no, I won't even describe it. I'll spare you.
Yeah. We can fill in the gaps.
And
Yeah.
I was like, no, I'm at mile 5 and this is what the porta potty looks like. This is unacceptable.
Right.
So like I have like a little bit of a panic attack in the porta potty, and I'm just like, so I end up using it, whatever, get through that. I get out of the porta potty and I'm like off to the side and I'm like crying. And I'm like, oh my God, no, this can't be happening. I'm at mile 5. I have 21 more miles. Like, this cannot be happening. So it takes me 24 minutes to complete mile 5. And I'm like in pain. So I'm having stomach pain, like stomach cramps. And just like, I'm still trying to like get over this panic attack. So like mile 5 to mile like 13 were the most mentally challenging points of the race. Like that, because for me, giving up wasn't an option. Like that, I'm not stopping. Giving up is not an option. We have to get through this one way or another. It has to be done. So throughout the time of mile 5 to 13, I'm still like, I'm feeling physically unwell. And I also haven't been fueling because I feel physically unwell. But at the same time, it's like I'm running through Brooklyn, and it's like the crowd was, I've never experienced a crowd like that at a race. I had my name written on my bib. Everyone's screaming my name. Everyone just the cheer. People are in the streets. Like people are like this, like people across from each other with their hands like this, and you're running like through them. Like the
Crazy.
Experience of the crowd is like that. There is no other marathon like that. There really isn't. So I'm experiencing these amazing things, but at the same time going through like such a physically terrible time. So that was like the first half. I mean, it carried on into the second half. But then I know that I'm going to see my family and my friends at mile 16 when you get off of the Queensboro Bridge, which everyone says like when you get off that bridge, it's like the energy is unmatched, which is so true, because that bridge, that's the one thing about New York, is the bridges are very lonely. They're very like, you really have to dig deep to get through them, because first of all, they're hills. They go like this.
Right.
And there's nobody cheering. It's just, you hear like the pitter patter of the feet, and it's like, it's such a weird experience. But then you get to like the crowd, and it's like, I saw my family and my friends, and like, I was like, guys, I'm gonna die. Like, I'm actually gonna die out here. Like, this is terrible. This is miserable. And they're like, no, keep going. So then I obviously keep going. I have no choice at this point.
Yeah.
But I'm mainly walking. Like, I'm walking this marathon. It's like every once in a while I'll like start jogging, but then I'm like, oh, my stomach, and I'm just walking. So then I have to stop again at mile 17 to use a porta potty. That one surprisingly wasn't as bad. I'm like, how is the porta potty on mile 17 better looking than the mile 5 one? Like,
right. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
I'm like, come on. So from mile 16 to the end, it like, I honestly basically walked it. And I wasn't fueling because I was still having stomach issues. I was crying. I was like going through all the things.
It.
But then at the same time, it's like, then you see these people that are so excited to see you, so excited that you're there. And it's like, it was a roller coaster of emotions the entire time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So yeah, that's crazy. Okay. So you were, the miles that you said that were the toughest, like between 5, you said 5 and like 13, right?
Yeah.
So that, and you didn't have a DNF in your mind. Obviously you said
that was not
there's
no
option that you were going to quit. So what were you saying to yourself, like mentally, to keep moving forward? How did you keep your body like physically moving forward when you were at such a low point there?
I think it was I just kept thinking about the end. Like, think about the end. Think about you getting that medal. You've worked so hard for this throughout the training, throughout everything. Like, the people are here supporting you. Like, people have spent their day running around New York City to support you. And they're proud of me no matter what. Like, they don't care how long it took me. They don't care if it takes me 8 hours, if it takes me 3 hours. Like, they're just happy to be there, happy to support me. So I'm just thinking about my support system, getting to the end, thinking about how like that's the only option. That's it. You have to get to the end. You have to get the medal. You worked way too hard for this to stop. Like there's nothing
Yeah.
else you could do.
Yeah. Yeah, and that just kind of carries you through as much as you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
Did the crowd, like when you would go through those major, I mean, it sounds like New York is just constantly a party, but like those
Yeah.
bigger, more congested areas where you had like the more crowd support, do you feel like the adrenaline helped at all with
Yes.
having that many people with stomach issues and things like that?
Definitely. That's when I would kind of like pick it up a little bit and like start jogging a little bit, because I'm like, no, like they're
Yeah.
cheering me on. Like I have to. I can't just walk past them. Like I have to.
Yeah.
It's like I have to give them something more. I gotta run.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that definitely helps, having people cheering. And like some people have mixed feelings about having your name on your bib. I'm somebody that always loves that, because I love when people scream my name. When I'm just like running past them like strangers, it's just, there's something so special about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, some people find it distracting, but I'm like, no, scream my name, please. I need it. Like I need I need the push.
Yeah, so important.
Yeah. Yeah, so it feels like you have like more of a deeper connection with the person screaming your name, because it's like, you know me.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I know some people have talked about it being like a little bit overwhelming, just having so many people screaming at you. But when you're in like the pain cave, like it sounds like you were for most of this race.
Yes.
That's probably what was like pulling you through this whole thing.
I needed that. Yeah, I needed it.
Yeah. Cool. So then the race is usually I know this race you had your stomach issue, so it all probably felt hard. But usually it's like your first 10, your second 10, and then that last 6
Yes.
is like, all right, I'm ready for this to be done.
Yes.
What was it like hitting mile 20 for you?
So when I hit mile 20, I was like, okay, there's only 6 left. Like I made it this far, it's only 6. But so at mile 20, I was still feeling like the pain that I felt the entire time, but also now it's like the leg pain. So like that was new for me. I was like, oh my God, my stomach, like what? And then now my legs, like I was like, oh my God, no, like somebody's gonna have to drag me across this finish line. Like I'm gonna have to crawl. Like I gotta get there. And even if I have to crawl, like it's happening. So around mile, I want to say it was like 22, one of my friends, because at this point it's dark. Like it took me almost 8 hours to finish. Like it's dark now. And I'm in Central Park and the crowd's kind of thinning out. But one of my friends, she found me because she had my location, and she comes. And at that point, also, they're a little more lenient with like security and like being on the course, which was great, honestly. So one of my friends, she has a sign and she's screaming my name. She's like running with me. Like she's like, you could do it. How are you feeling? Like she's talking me through it. And having that was so helpful. And then also at one point, somebody was handing out Cheez-Its. And that also saved me because I wasn't fueling at all. I was starving. Sure. So I was like, Cheez-Its. I was like, I could stomach those. So like,
right.
Between like those two things from like mile 20 on is like what really got me through, because I'm like, I'm so close. I have to make it. But yeah, I was still fighting, you know, the mental barrier of it all. But I'm like, no, like I really am close this time. I really need to finish.
Yeah. Cool. And then the finish line. So that was your first major finish line, but also your first marathon finish line. So I'm sure that's just like all amplified at that point.
Yes.
So what did you feel like finally crossing the finish line after 8 hours of going through hell?
God. Like I could cry just thinking about it. It's
yeah.
Like the New York is so special because they keep the finish line up for every single person, like the last person that finishes. And you will have a crowd there still cheering for you. So having that at the finish line is like, it just makes it so much more emotional. So like crossing that finish line, I have pictures that the photographers took of me, and it's like you see on my face the relief. Like I instantly start crying. I get my medal, and it's almost like people are more because it's just like a few stragglers crossing the finish line at that point. People are so much more like congratulatory towards you because it's very like individual, rather than it's like you have a mob of people and it's like you're just saying congratulations to everyone. So I really felt like I needed that once I finished, and like having people just say like, no, like you did it. This is amazing. Great for you. And like saying things more than just like congratulations. So like that feeling is like, I can't even describe it. It's New York is just so special. I would recommend any person running New York if they have the chance to.
For sure. Yeah, no, that's amazing. I'm like, every time I ask that question, somebody talks about a finish line, I get chills every time. Like,
Yeah.
no, no fail. Cause it is such a cool, it's such a cool experience. And once you've experienced it, you want everybody else to have that same feeling.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing is like, you can't even explain it to somebody. It's
You
so hard
can't.
to explain. It's something you need to feel. And like, ever since then, I always said to people, I'm like, if you have any inkling, any little piece of you that wants to run a marathon, you need to do it. You need to do it. Anybody is physically capable of completing a marathon, but it's really just pushing through and having the discipline and getting over the mental battle that makes you be able to do it. So I think that if you want to do it, you need to do it.
100%. Yeah, 100% agree.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, we know that your journey didn't stop there because
Nope.
we know you've ran a second marathon. But what were you thinking right after the race? Did you fall into the like never again category
So
or?
so it's actually funny. One of my friends that was there, she recorded me after I finally found them. I have my like orange cape on that they give you my medal on, and she's recording me like a post race interview. And she's like, "So, like, how did it go?" And I'm like, "It was miserable." Um, and I'm like, would not recommend to a friend, like, absolutely not, never doing this again, like, no. And then somebody said, like, so when are you doing the next marathon? And I was like, no, I have to do another marathon. So it's like within the same breath, I'm like, I'm never doing this again. And then I'm like, no, I have to do another one because this
Right.
cannot be my only experience. So so I originally went into that marathon being like, this is a one and done. This was a bucket list thing that's been on my bucket list for the past 3 years. I'm going to just do it, get it over with. But then once I finished, I was like, no, I have to do better. I have to do another one. Like it got in my head like that day, I'm doing another marathon. It's happening.
It has to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like the revenge thing where you're like, okay, I did it. I got it under, but now I feel like I can do it a little bit better because now I understand it.
Yes.
So cool. So then that was already in your mind. So you obviously started off running a world major. Did you know that you wanted to run another world major like kind of early on after the race, or where did that come up?
Yeah, so for that, because I am so slow, or I was slower then, um, I was like, I feel like I can only run world majors because if you go, because one time I did a half marathon that was, or I didn't end up doing it, but I signed up for a half marathon that was just like a random one in like Queens, like on the boardwalk, and they were doing a 5K and a half marathon. And when I saw the amount of people, I was like, I'm like, nobody's going to be there when I finish. Like I'm like, I'm too slow for this. So I ended up just like running the 5K. So when I started having experiences like that, where if I would go to a smaller race and like see the amount of people were there, I would get like anxious about it. And I'm like, I can only run majors. So like I always had in my mind, I can only run majors because I don't want to like not finish. Like I don't want to finish and have it not be counted as a finish because they closed down the finish line.
Right.
So at that point I got in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do like the next like easiest world major, which was Chicago. Easier in the sense that it's not like to get into it and to raise money is easier than like Boston, let's say.
Right. Yeah.
So at that point I was like, I'm only doing majors because of that reason.
Yeah, that's a good point. I actually haven't thought about that. I haven't ran a world major myself, but I haven't thought about that. Because these local races, I mean, too, maybe their credit, maybe not. They don't always have the resources to like stay open and like keep volunteers for that long and things like that. But
yeah, which is totally understandable. It's
totally.
I completely get that. I did a half marathon earlier this year. It was in like Rhode Island. It was like a random one.
Yeah.
And it was like the same experience. Like the cutoff time was like 3 hours and 30 minutes. It was in the middle of July. It was so hot, and I'm like, the cutoff is 3:30. I'm like, I don't know, like that's like bold. I know I'm gonna have to walk. So yeah, and just like kind of running alone, it's like I might as well just have gone on this run alone.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So I mean, and you get to run some majors. I guess that's the positive side. Yeah, get all the cool races.
Exactly.
But you landed on Chicago. So Chicago, and you said that you were raising money. So you got in through charity for Chicago.
Yeah. So I did. I put myself in the lottery. Didn't get selected. So I was like, okay, let me just do a charity because you have to raise, or at least last year you had to, or this past year you had to raise, $1,750.
Okay.
Which is low considering like New York, you have to raise like 3,500. Boston, you have to raise like 10,000.
Right.
So, so I was like, okay, like 1750, I could figure that out. Like
Yeah.
that seems like it's possible.
Okay, cool. So Chicago's a really fun one. So you obviously were probably thinking about what we did from the first marathon that we want to
Hmm.
change. So what were some of those things, if you could pick a few that you were like, all right, this is what I want to focus on for
So
this marathon block?
yes, so ran New York in November and then gave myself like a month off. I was like, I need to mentally and physically recover from this. Like,
Yeah.
let's take a break. So I gave myself a month off, and then it was like towards the end of December, and I was like, you know, I need to like do something now. I can't just do what I did last year and wait until the actual marathon training block starts, because that just doesn't work for me. I found out that that doesn't
Yeah.
work. So I started doing some weight training December, January, February, but also running. I signed up for a half marathon in, I think it was April. I ran that one this past April. So I was like, okay, I have like a goal. I know I'm going to run a half marathon in April. So I just continued training. I just did weightlifting, running, started getting like a little faster. And I was like, oh, wow, like I can actually run a little faster, is in like 12-minute miles as opposed to 14. But,
Sure.
um,
That's
but
huge.
still,
2 minutes off your
well,
time is
yeah, I
huge.
mean, I know that makes such a difference. Where like,
Yeah.
so yeah, so I started just training earlier. Um, and then after that, I ran that first half marathon in April. I was like, I want to run another one. So then I got into the Brooklyn half marathon a month later. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm running another half marathon. And then after that, I was
Yeah.
like, I want to run another one. So I signed up for another half marathon. So I ran 3 half marathons in the beginning of the year before I even started
Yeah.
like my actual training block. So that was definitely like, for somebody that wants to get into running, that's what I would recommend to them, is like, do sign up for races in between that will lead up to the full marathon, just to kind of like keep you on track.
Totally. Yeah. Cause then you're coming in with this awesome base. You're like, your
Yeah.
18 weeks isn't starting from 0. Your 18 weeks is starting from 13, which is just like a
Yes.
massive
Yeah,
difference.
exactly. Yeah, it makes such a difference.
For sure. Cool. So you trained a little bit earlier, and was there anything else in terms of like anything for the stomach issues that you were planning on working on from a fuel
Yes.
perspective, or was that more of just like a fluke for the
No,
marathon?
so the stomach issues thing, I remember I made a TikTok about it, like telling everybody
Yeah.
my race experience. I was like, so this is like this is my experience. This is why it took me almost 8 hours to finish. And everyone started commenting, you have to take Imodium. They're like, what are you
Mm.
doing? You have to take Imodium. Which, for people that don't know what Imodium is, it is for when you have diarrhea. It makes you not have diarrhea.
Yeah. Real
So
scientific on this podcast.
yes.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh wow, people are commenting like I should take Imodium. Like, I mean, I guess that makes sense. Like, people get runner's stomach all the time. Like, that's a normal thing.
Yeah.
So then I first tried it for my half marathon that I had in April. I just took it before the half, and I was like, okay, I mean, I guess like it worked. I didn't have to stop at all for anything. So then now it's like, that's part of my race protocol. My race day protocol is to take Imodium, even if I feel like I don't need it. Like, just take it. So
Yeah. Better
that's
safe.
so that's one thing that changed about preparing for a race, which I would recommend to people. Is I had on marathon day, my first marathon, I had everything in my bag. I had everything I needed except for Imodium. So,
Imodium. Yeah.
like, the one thing I actually needed.
Yeah. No, that's a really good tip. Yeah, I've heard that before, but I've never tried it myself, so maybe I'll take some advice
Yeah.
there as well. But
Yeah, the one, so just disclaimer, people say that it can dehydrate you. So just make sure that you are constantly hydrating if you take it.
double hydrating, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So made a few adjustments, and we don't have to get into as much detail about Chicago, but how did the actual race end up for you? Like, did you have any goals going into it? What was the highlights of running Chicago?
So for Chicago, I went in feeling a lot more prepared. I was actually like, I felt ready for it. And then at that point, I was looking back in like my experience for my first marathon, and I was like, I wasn't prepared for that. So like, going into Chicago, I was like, no, like, I feel good. And
Yeah.
I still kind of had the goal of just wanting to do better than my first marathon. Like, I still didn't put too much pressure on myself. But then I started saying like, no, I want to finish in like 6 hours. Like let's do 6 hours. But either way, I want to do better than my first marathon. So going into Chicago, just the whole experience of, well, first of all, getting to the start line in Chicago, a breeze. Like a
Compared
breeze.
to New
I'm
York,
like,
I bet.
I got there. Like I remember I took the train from my hotel room and got to the start line and I was like, wait, this is it? Like I'm like, I'm here? Like that's crazy. So that caused like a lot less anxiety about like getting to the start line and all the logistics. The only thing that is worse with Chicago is the porta potty situation at the start line. Like people were saying that the lines, well, I waited in line for like 45 minutes and only got to go to the bathroom once before. But that was fine. I didn't have to stop at all throughout the entire race. But yeah, so the entire race as a whole is like, I had my fueling down for the most part. But I was fueling as compared to my first race where I didn't fuel at all. So I was fueling. Sure. I felt like the first half of the race went really well. In terms of like how I was feeling and all of that. And then just kind of hit my wall a little earlier than I wanted to. I hit the wall kind of at mile 16, which was a little disappointing. And then it was like mile 19 to 20. I had a little bit of a mental breakdown, but don't we all?
Normal.
Like, yeah. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm so disappointed. Like, I just feel so defeated because at that point I knew like I wasn't going to get like 6 hours. I ended up finishing in 6:20, which is like still so much better than my first marathon. That's an hour and 40 minutes off of my first marathon time. Huge. So I was still like happy about that. But still was just at the same time feeling like a little defeated where it's like, oh, like I worked so hard for this. Like I wish I could have just finished in 6 hours. But then obviously you get to the finish line and like you feel all the things again. And yeah, after Chicago though, that really lit a fire in me. Like I have not been the same since.
Yeah, is it just like now you've got your first marathon under your belt where you like trial and error a little bit, and then the second one you like started to put the piece. Is it just like I know what I need to do now? Is that the fire?
It was like after Chicago, I was like, okay, I know what I can do. I know that I could do this, but now I need to just fit the pieces together correctly. Like I know, like I stopped in the beginning of the year. I stopped weightlifting because I just focused on running, and it's like doing those little things to kind of fine tune it. And I was like, no, I'm going into my next marathon with an actual goal. Like I'm not just going to finish. Like we are going to make sure, like now I'm starting weight training now. I have a personal trainer. I'm following a running plan for like my next half marathon coming up. And I'm just like I'm locked in. Like I am just so locked in. And it's like the only thing I do now, the only thing I think about, like I plan my life around my races, my runs, and it feels like I have tunnel vision and like that's it. This is all I can focus on.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. And then it's so like empowering when you have that itch where you're like, all right, goal time. Yeah. We got this. Like, let's go.
Yeah. And it's like also like surrounding yourself by people that believe in you as well. It makes such a difference. Like I started one-on-one personal training, a little over a month ago. And at this gym I go to, I was just like talking with some of the trainers and like I jokingly said, you know, I'm going to run a 3-hour marathon. Like I'm going to Boston qualify. And like I said, it was a joke. I'm like, I'm running a 6-hour marathon. Like I'd have to cut my marathon time in half. Like that's ridiculous.
Right.
And I started like laughing, but then one of the trainers goes, why can't you? And I was like, I mean, I'd have to cut 3 hours off my marathon time. And he's like, okay, why can't you? And I was like, oh my God, do I have a Boston qualifying goal now? Like,
yeah,
so it's like just having that energy around you, it makes you feel like you literally can do anything. If you have a goal, like you could do it.
Totally. Yeah. And then as soon as you do that hard thing the first time, and then you do it the second time, and then you do it the third time, you're just constantly reinforcing that in your brain where you're like, exactly. No, I can do anything that I put my mind to. I just need to work towards it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so many people out there. I feel like they wait to do something that they always wanted to do, where it's like, oh, I'll do this when I'm skinnier. I'll do this when I'm faster. And I'm like, no, do it now. I did it. It took me almost 8 hours to complete my first marathon. Just do it. Just sign up for the race and do it. Like you don't have to wait for anything. You should just do it and then you improve from there.
Yeah. No, I love it. Yeah, do it now. It's never going to be easier than it is now. So start now.
Why wait? Why wait? Just do it.
Love it. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for breaking down your experiences.
Yeah.
I think it's cool. It was cool to hear how you got to like New York City Marathon and explaining like some of the things that you've changed throughout has been really insightful. And I know you've got some stuff coming up next. So what are your goals for these next couple half marathons that you've got on the calendar right now?
Yes. So I have 2 half marathons coming up, one in February. It's in New York City runs, one in Central Park. And then I got into the lottery for the New York City United Airlines half. So the first one in February is just kind of be like a trial run, like training run. I'm going to try not to like take it so seriously. But then the New York City United Airlines half, I'm going to try to PR that. And actually see kind of like the work that I've put in these past few months with like weightlifting and doing some speed work and see kind of what the result of that is during that half marathon. And then I'm also doing the 9+1 again this year. So I have like 9 races I'm signed up for so that I could run next year's, New York City Marathon. But then also I did the 9+1 last year. So I will be running the 2025 New York City Marathon. So all of this will lead up to that.
So exciting. Yeah. And then you got the full year to focus on the marathon and put all of this stuff into play. So that's so exciting.
It's going to be my redemption, my New York City Marathon redemption.
Love it. Love it. Cool. Well, looking forward to seeing that. I just have a couple last questions that I like to ask at the end, more just like fun questions to ask. And then the very last question, I get some questions from the audience as well. So I'll shout them out and ask you one of those questions as well. But starting with fuel. So we talked a little bit about it, but what have been your favorite fuel options throughout marathon training? I know you said you're not really a gel person, but what's been some of your favorites?
Well, I did find a gel that actually does agree with me a little better. So that's the BPN Go Gels. Their apple cinnamon one tastes like applesauce, so I do love those. So those have been my go-to. I do also like using, they're called Scratch Energy Chews.
Love those.
Yeah, so those are my go-to. And then I like to always have a Honey Stinger waffle on me at times.
Cool. Yeah, I love those too.
Yeah, so those are my go-to that I usually use for every race.
Sweet. And then shoes. I should have given this for fuel, but the disclaimer for everything that we're about to say is this is all so personal. Please go get your feet measured, make your own decision. Please try out your own fuel. But for you, what shoes do you like?
Yes. So I got fitted for my shoes at like a running store, so that I do recommend to everybody. But I use Hoka Clifton 9s. Those are my go-to right now for running shoes.
Sweet. Cool. I love that. And then last question is from Marathon Ellie. Shout out to Ellie for this question. She asks, what is your favorite post-marathon meal?
Ooh, my favorite post-marathon meal? So, well, for my first marathon, I had a bacon cheeseburger, and honestly, that was amazing. That was like, especially after New York, like that was amazing. And then after Chicago, I got deep dish pizza. So
classic. Yeah, you have
honestly,
to.
But like you can't go wrong. Like just after any long run, you can't go wrong with like pasta and sauce and like chicken or like pizza. Yeah, I think probably after
anything with
runs,
a ton of carbs.
Yes, just anything that is like delicious, like nourishes you. Just because you're starving. So yeah.
Cool. Love it. Well, sweet. Well, excited to see how everything turns out for you over the next year training for New York and all these halves you have and these big goals that you have. And if anyone wants to follow along with you, where can they find you?
So my handles across the board are Race with Amanda. I'm usually posting every single run I'm on, just even if it's like a 3-miler, 5-miler, and then I'll just be documenting my entire journey throughout the year for my halves and then my full marathon this year.
Sweet. Well, I'll put all your information in the show notes, of course. But thank you again for coming on and telling your story. This was awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. This is great.
Thank you so much for tuning into another episode. If you're enjoying My First Marathon, it would mean the world to me if you could rate and review the show. And if you or someone you know has ran a marathon and would like to share your story, I have a guest form to fill out in my bio on Instagram. That username is @MyFirstMarathonPod. See you on the next one.